All right, welcome back to the workshop. Hello, happy holidays. We're a little past Christmas and just before New Year's, and I wanted to talk about the car that was kind of my holy grail. This is my E34 M5 Touring, 1994 model year. I've owned it for going on 11 years. Um, we'll do the little intro and a walk around and get it outside, and then maybe take a little drive in it afterwards. Apologies for it being dirty. I did a Christmas Eve drive with some friends. It was rainy and messy, and I actually drove it to the office today to unload some boxes into the storage unit and get rid of some stuff that we don't want around after the new year starts, which is also why I'm dressed in what I would call clinic attire today, because I came from the office. So this is a 94 M5 Touring. It is painted in an individual color that BMW called Madeira Schwarz in 1994. There were two cars in this color. This is one of them. And then in 1995, there were two more. Same color code, which I think was 302, but BMW changed the name from Madeira Schwarz to Madeira Violet, which is a little bit more fitting because it is kind of a purple, like a dark purple color. And a lot of people, when they see this car, they don't understand the Schwarz part because it's not black. I bought this with 186,000 kilometers in Southern California. It was imported to the US by a friend of mine in 2007. Back then, the cars did have to be federalized, so this went through the federalization process. By the time he had done this car, he kind of had it down and knew what was going to happen, because when you federalize a non-US car, all of the European stuff that's not legal is supposed to get destroyed. So headlights, instrument cluster, a bumper trim without side markers. So this car, all of that stuff was stripped off before it got on the boat in Germany, and then it arrived without headlights and without an instrument cluster, and US parts were put on to federalize it. And then, of course, as you do, once the car is legal and registered, all the European stuff went back on it. The M5 Touring was introduced in 1991 at the Frankfurt Auto Show. It was also the debut of the 3.8-liter six-cylinder that the M5 sedan, like my silver car in the background, have. So it were a couple of things that were new for that model, for the model year of 1992. All Tourings are 3.8s, regardless of grills or whatever. Some people think wide grill means 3.8, but they were actually narrow grill cars in 1992 and 1993 and early 1994. All Tourings had staggered wheels, 17 by 8 in the front, 17 by 9 in the rear, with 235 and 255 size tires. Slightly larger sway bar in the back. They all had self-leveling. The dual sunroof was an option, but it was a popular option. Only 140 something cars did not have a sunroof and were the slick top models. Back to numbers, 891 of these cars were built between about March of 92 and July of 95. So they kind of ran late into the 95 model year. There were some changes throughout the year. Starting around May of 1994, the Throwing Star wheels were switched with M parallels, which I've got a set over here. I'll pull one out. And larger front and rear brakes, 345 with 4-pot calipers in the front, 328 with single pot in the rear. And the big thing was going from a 5-speed to a 6-speed. So 5-speed with a 391 diff was then changed to a 6-speed with a 323 diff. So probably a much more mellow car on the highway. This is an early 94, so it's a 5-speed car. And 80 miles an hour is probably about 3,500, 3,600 RPM, which this engine is totally happy at that point, but you are aware that it's there. I've added the bigger brakes to this car, which a lot of people did in the time. They definitely make a difference. They have a great feel. The problem is it's starting to get hard to get parts, especially in the US, where a lot of this stuff is being blocked by BMW North America. There are a couple of aftermarket companies where you can get pads, and I've got a couple extra sets of brake discs for the inevitable time when that's needed. And what else? This is a double sunroof car. This was an individual car, individual color, black leather interior, dual airbags. Back when the cars were being imported and had to be federalized, it was always easiest to find a car that was as close to US spec as possible. So to find a car with dual airbags made the importation process a lot easier. It still was a 6-month and like $7,000 or $8,000 process to make the car legal, which really not a lot had to be done to these cars. This car passes smog every year, and it's never every other year when it's due. So it's a lot of unleaded fuel only stickers, emission decals, and paperwork that California required, or the U.S. required at the time, since the car was under 25 years. So we've touched on this with the sedan, but we'll talk a little bit about the engine. The 3.8 was the biggest six-cylinder that BMW ever made. This was BMW's first big six to have, maybe the only big, well, no, not the only, yeah, the only big six to have coil-on plug ignition. It used the Medtronic 3.3 DME. Resonance flap in the plenum, which had two different pathways for airflow to help increase low-end torque. One of BMW's claims for this engine was 80% of its torque was produced from 2,000 RPM on. Compared to a 3.6, definitely a lot easier car to drive around town. It's got a lot more torque below 4,000 RPM than a 3.6, but it still pulls hard up to the 7,200 RPM red line. It's really a great engine. When I first had a 3.6 M5 and then later jumped up to an E39 M5, the gap between those two cars in performance is huge. And it wasn't until getting actually the sedan, because that was the first 3.8 I had, where you really see the lineage between the two. It is kind of a stepping stone between the 3.6 S38 and the S62. There's just a lot more area under the curve from a torque standpoint. With the 3.6, you're always wanting to rev the car over 4,000 RPM, which is fun because that's really where they come alive. But with this, it's really a pleasant car to drive all the time. I've put about 40,000, no, actually about 60,000 kilometers on this car. I'm just about to hit 250,000 kilometers. So yeah, I'm right at 60,000. And it's really not needed much. These have a mixed reputation. Back in the day that I got these on the internet forums, people would say, oh, you need rod bearings every 100,000 miles or so. In both of my cars, I thought, well, maybe I should do that. So checked them out. We did it, and rod bearings were fine in both cars at 167,000 and 186,000 kilometers. But they're both fresh, and so it's a nice peace of mind to know that I'm not going to have any issues, and I could really drive this car like it was meant to be driven. All the wagons had electronic dampening control. All 3.8s really came that way. So you've got adjustable shocks, self-leveling in the rear. There's a switch on the dash. In normal mode, which on the dash switch is called P for program, you're in your soft setting. There are 3 accelerometers and a computer under the back seat, which takes info from the accelerometers, speed signal from the instrument cluster, and it adapts the stiffness. And it works pretty well, considering it was BMW's first attempt at this sort of thing, and it was from really late 80s technology. Of course, you can't buy the parts anymore. Everybody who has these cars now knows you can have the shocks rebuilt. There's a company in Poland that does a really nice job. Shocks on this car, fronts have been rebuilt, rears have not. The rears tend to last a lot longer as long as the accumulators don't go bad. The accumulators actually control the pressure of the fluid and the dampening. So if the accumulator goes bad, you get a much higher amount of fluid pressure at the shock that blows out seals. So those are kind of a wear item that you should probably replace every, 80,000 kilometers, 100,000 kilometers. I replaced all of that when I first bought the car, as well as the hoses and everything else. And it's been a rock solid car. I've driven it to a few different rallies. I've driven it up and down the west coast of the U.S. It's like most of the cars I have. It's one of these cars I could confidently jump in and drive anywhere tomorrow, rain or shine, and which is why it's dirty, which we'll see when we pull it outside, because it is really pretty dirty. So before the walk around, let's talk about the obvious thing that makes this different from the sedan, the Touring body shell. The Touring body, so this is the last M car that was produced by hand at the Garching factory at what back then was called the BMW Motorsports and is now called BMW M. I think the name changed around 95, 96. So body shells were built in Dingolfing. Depending on the color, they were either painted or partially painted and then shipped to the Motorsport factory. Individual colors like this would have a base coat, and then they would be finish painted at Motorsport. So this car has an Arctic silver base coat without the clear. Then the Madeira Schwarz and clear were applied at the Motorsport factory, and then the rest of the car was assembled there. BMW made a big deal about the two-piece tailgate. So the glass can open separately. There's a little switch that I already opened because it doesn't always work. These are known for having wiring harness issues because you've got a harness that kind of goes in through the hinges and flexes and fails over time. I rebuilt the harness on this car when I first got it because it was, of course, bad. The micro switches and the switches also tend to go bad. So I think that's my issue now because it takes a few tries, there we go, to get this to pop. Same thing with the main hatch. Oh, it actually worked that time. First try. So main hatch, reasonably sized cargo area. You got your toolkit up in the lid as BMW fashion, spare tire. If you had a CD changer, you'd have a little bump here where the CD changer would go. This car does not have one. And this car has kind of an interesting cargo cover. I'll bring the camera around. I've seen this on one other car, and they're really kind of fiddly, but it's actually designed with metal bars in it. You can actually supposedly support something up to 25 kilograms on top of this, which will fly around the cabin. Although there are dog nets that you could pull up from the back seat to help contain things in the back. But super handy car. I mean, I have a roof, the factory roof rack that goes with it. I have bike mounts, and back when I first got this car, we drove it everywhere. We took it on family vacations. I'd have my and the kids' bikes on the roof. And, you know, it was just a great car. It's really E34, said it before, it's my favorite BMW chassis. The size just feels right to me. The look is the classic BMW look to me with the 4 round headlights. I love wagons. Back in the period when these were new, when my first son was born, I bought a 525, which US we got 525 and 530 wagons, all automatics. And that's about when I learned that there was such a thing as an M5 Touring, and that became the car that I wanted to have at some point. Never imported to the US, as you all know probably. There are, last time I looked at the registry, I think we're getting close to upper 40s, maybe 50 cars have come to the US. So they are out there now. There's still plenty of them in Europe. The big thing is finding one that's not rusty, because if they're like E34s that are used in salt, they will tend to rust. This car came over in 07 and it had a clean body, and I'm in California, so it's never going to rust here. Sunroof works. It didn't when I got it. Maybe I'll include a little shot of how that works, but the 2 panels slide independently, so you can bring the front panel back, you can bring the back panel forward, or you can kind of sandwich them on top of each other and have half an opening either way. So I'll move the camera in a minute. We'll open that up and show you. Car is far from perfect. The paint looks great probably from there, but I've been fighting with some clear coat failure that I think I'm really going to have to do something about, because along the top of the hatch, the clear is peeling away. Also along the molding on the driver's side, there's some issues with it. The front fender had been repainted long before I got the car, and it doesn't totally match, so I'm thinking maybe paint that side, wrap around to the tailgate just to get all that good. I hate painting a whole car, especially when everything else is really pretty good. So let's bring the camera in and I'll show you the sunroof. Part of federalizing is putting a key warning buzzer in these cars that did not have them from the factory, which you may be able to hear. It's not a BMW part. It does a little multi-tone song. But let's show you how the sunroof works. So if you want both panels open, first you have to hit the rear panel. There is one touch on these. So rear panel will open. I redid the headliner in Alcantara, and the Alcantara, the extra thickness, causes a little bit more drag. So the sunroof works slower than it really should. Always makes me a little nervous using these, but I do use it, and I'm kind of a believer that if you use it, it will work. Whereas if you don't use it, when you do try to use it, it'll break. So you could do something like this, where you've got rear, front. When my kids were little and I had my 525, you know, this was always a favorite, having the back half of the sunroof open when we were taking a road trip or even going to school. You could slide it in different orientations of more front, more rear, and you can just hit the button and it should one touch close. This car was used for a Haggerty video with Jason Camisa, a drag race video, which, you know, these cars aren't made for drag racing, but the car did surprisingly well. 0 to 60 was quoted at about 5.5 seconds, and quarter mile like 14.2. Actually was faster than an Audi RS4, which kind of surprised me. Slower than, they had a Mercedes 500D sedan in that drag race too, which it was slower by 1/10 in the quarter and a couple tenths 0 to 60, which, yeah, I've got a 500D. Maybe these are pretty close. I think the sedan would take the 500D though. But 70 kilograms heavier in a wagon versus the sedan, most of that extra weight towards the rear. Still a great balanced car. I mean, you're not going to typically take one of these to the track at this point, although I have done some track days in that car in the past. But they're really just fun cars to drive on back roads, great on the highway. So let's get it outside so you can see the color a little better in the sun or in the overcast light. Let's do a little walk around. The color comes out a little better in the front. So I was talking about grills earlier. This is a wide grill car. Well, maybe not originally. There was an option starting in the summer of '93 where you could specify the wider grille and wider hood. On the build sheet, it should say that it was built with the M60 grille and hood. Mine doesn't, so I'm guessing at some point there was some sort of crash that happened and someone figured they would upgrade. You could also send your pre-95 M5 sedan or Touring back to BMW and have them do a factory upgrade where they would update the look with the wider grille. They would give you the bigger brakes like we have here. They would also do a 6-speed swap and give you a new M5 as a loaner. It was just under 30,000 Deutschmarks to do that. There's no records of how many people took them up on that or if anyone did. So this car, another difference, the colored stars. So those stars unbolt from the cover. This car originally they were silver, so the whole wheel was silver. The other 94 car, I was able to get build sheets on all the Madeira cars. The other 94 had center match, color match centers, which I thought sounded kind of good. So I ended up buying another set of centers. So I do have the silver ones originally, and I painted these Madeira Schwarz to match the car. As I'd mentioned before, bigger brakes. Some markets had the side marker like this one, some didn't. You can kind of see how the front fender is a little darker than the rest of the car when the light hits it just right, so that front fender doesn't quite match, so wouldn't mind repainting that. This car originally did come with the M mirrors, which you could get on an M5 starting in the 92 model year. Roof rails were an option, which I think on a wagon, that's handy. You want to be able to haul stuff. As I'd mentioned before, I've got some clear coat failure in different spots, and it is dirty, but I like a clean car, but you know, I don't mind a dirty car either. I like using them. More important to me to drive them than to stress over whether they're clean or not. So it does get out. I mean, I'm in California, so the weather's never that bad, but I don't mind taking it out in the rain. Take a quick look on the inside here. So this has, the door panels were replaced with late 95 door panels with the more gathered leather and wood. This car originally would not have had wood trim. Door panels always failed on these. The late ones like these seem to hold up pretty well. So these have been good. There's a little driver's side glove box down here where you could store your wallet. They called it a pistol something. So in theory, I guess you could put a small gun in there. This is an airbag car. It has the M stitching on the steering wheel. Again, all of the original Euro gauges, which were put right back in after the car made it to the US in 248,000 kilometers. 5-speed car, period accessory cup holder. And then this armrest thing is also kind of a period accessory. It's got a little hole in the bottom that vents down to the AC duct. So it is cooled, so you could put a small bottle of water or a sandwich or something in there. Usually just keeps my wallet and glasses cold. Manual seats on this car. Fire extinguisher would have been part of the European German market. Rear door shades. They're just basic black leather. kind of like what you would get in a US spec car. Although this is actually Napa leather, so it is a little nicer leather. It's really a little softer. All right, let's see if we can get any sort of driving video in our mid-Saturday traffic. So this car is totally stock, stock chip, stock exhaust. I have an aftermarket chip that I've run in the car. It does make a little bit of difference. I actually took it out when it was going to the Haggerty drag race video because I wanted it to be totally honest stock car. Plus it tends to detonate a bit in hot temperatures, and they do those tests in Willow Springs, and it was the summertime, so I thought it'd be a little safer. What I really should have done is kept the chip in and thrown some 96 octane gas in it, but you know, try to be honest. So we'll see what we can get here. thanks for watching my video on my kind of dirty E34 M5 Touring. Hope you enjoyed it and maybe found some good information in there. I'd mentioned this car was used for a Haggerty video in one of Jason Camisa's drag race series. I'll put a link in the description for that in case you haven't seen it. The production values on those videos are really pretty amazing. And they're fun. They're fun to watch. You know, not a big drag race fan, but he really breaks it down, and the cinematography is really cool. So at any rate, right, I'm going to probably be back in a few days with another touring video. I've got a friend who occasionally stores a car here with another purple E34 Touring, and we were talking about maybe doing a little video of the both of them together, some similarities and differences, and maybe we'll talk about his project that's upcoming, which is going to be a pretty epic build on that car. So again, thanks again for watching. If you don't subscribe, please do, and give it a like and share it with your friends. And I'll see you soon. Happy New Year.